Whispers of Shadow presents. Written and narrated by Gregory Sparrow. File 002, The Observation Room. Recovered Internal Archive, Facility Omega. Security Classification, Level Black. Original Designation, Observation Room. B12. Current Status, Sealed. Personnel referenced in this file: deceased, missing, or unconfirmed. The first warning appeared on the observation glass at 2:14 in the morning. It had been written from inside the room. That should have been impossible. Observation room B12 had been empty for 6 months. No subject had been placed inside. No technician had entered. The only door had remained locked, sealed, and continuously monitored. Yet, when the night supervisor checked the live camera feed, 5 words were visible on the glass. "You are standing too close." The supervisor stepped back. 3 seconds later, something struck the other side of the glass hard enough to crack it. Security searched the room. They found no one inside, but on the chair facing the observation window, there was a fresh personnel photograph. It showed the supervisor standing in the corridor, taken from behind, taken only moments earlier. What follows is the recovered record of Observation Room B12. If you are reading this inside Facility Omega, stop immediately. Do not look for the room. And if you are already standing in front of the glass, do not wait for your reflection to move. Recovered document 002-A, Observation Room. B12 did not appear on the original construction plans for Facility Omega. That was the first problem. The facility had been built beneath a decommissioned military communications station in northern England. Officially, the underground complex contained 12 research chambers, 2 medical laboratories, staff accommodation, power systems, and a restricted archive. Unofficially, it contained far more. Entire corridors had been omitted from the approved blueprints. Elevators stopped at levels that were not listed on their control panels. Maintenance teams sometimes discovered sealed doors behind recently installed walls. Most of these anomalies were explained as construction errors, outdated plans, or remnants of an earlier military installation. Room B12 was different. It was first discovered on the 17th of October, 1998, by electrical technician Thomas Vail. Vail had been sent to investigate a power fluctuation in the Western Observation Wing. According to his report, the lights in Corridor B failed at precisely 3:06 p.m. When the emergency lamps activated, a steel door was visible at the end of the corridor. Vail insisted the door had not been there before. It had no handle, no identification plate, only a narrow vertical window of black glass. When Vail approached, the door opened inward. Behind it was a small observation room. The chamber measured approximately 4 meters by 5. Its walls were bare concrete. A single fluorescent light hung from the ceiling. There was one metal table, one chair, and a wide pane of observation glass covering the far wall. The glass should have looked into another room. Instead, it reflected the chamber itself. Vale entered. He remained inside for 4 minutes and 17 seconds. During that time, the corridor camera recorded no unusual movement. When he emerged, he was pale and unable to speak. He walked directly to the administrative office and submitted his resignation. Under the section marked "Reason for Departure," he wrote, "The room was watching us first. Vale refused medical assistance. He left Facility Omega at 4:02 p.m. He disappeared 3 days later. His abandoned vehicle was found near the Northumberland coast. The driver's door was open. The keys remained in the ignition. On the passenger's seat, investigators found a photograph of Vale, sitting alone, inside observation room B12. The image had been taken from the opposite side of the observation glass. No camera had been installed there. Internal audio log, Dr. Eleanor Voss. Date, 21st October, 1998. Time, 9:40. My name is Dr. Eleanor Voss, Acting Director of Behavioral Research at Facility Omega. I have been instructed to begin a preliminary investigation into the chamber currently designated B12. Initial examination confirms that the room was not included in the architectural plans available to this department. However, structural analysis suggests it was built at the same time as the surrounding wing. The observation glass presents the first significant anomaly. There is no secondary chamber behind it. According to wall measurements, there should be solid, reinforced concrete directly beyond the pane. Ultrasound scans confirm this. Nevertheless, when viewed from inside B12, the glass behaves as a normal reflective surface. When viewed from the corridor monitoring station, the glass becomes transparent, allowing observers to see inside the room. This should not be physically possible. We have found no electronic display technology, projection system, or concealed lighting that could produce the effect. A chair and table were discovered inside. Both are standard Facility Omega equipment. Their serial numbers, however, belong to items currently in use elsewhere in the complex. The chair's serial number matches a chair in my own office. I am sitting in it now. Dr. Eleanor Voss was 38 years old when she took control of the investigation. She had spent most of her career studying sensory deprivation, memory reconstruction, and the psychological effects of long-term isolation. She did not believe in haunted rooms, impossible architecture, or objects that appeared without explanation. Her first conclusion was that B12 was a security test. Perhaps another department had constructed the chamber secretly. Perhaps the anomalies were deliberate. Perhaps she was being observed to measure her own reaction. She ordered the room searched. Every surface was scanned. The concrete walls were drilled in 6 locations. The ceiling light was removed and dismantled. The table was cut open. The chair was X-rayed. Nothing unusual was found. The observation glass could not be removed. Power tools failed whenever they touched its frame. The failures were not dramatic. The tools simply stopped. Batteries drained instantly. Electrical cables carried no current. Manual tools became too cold to hold. A technician attempting to strike the glass with a hammer later claimed that his reflection raised its arm before he did. The test was canceled. Dr. Voss decided to proceed with human observation, not experimentation. Observation. The distinction would become important later. Subject Trial 001. The first subject was a volunteer named Michael Renner. Renner was a 29-year-old security officer with no documented psychiatric conditions. He was selected because he had never heard of Thomas Vale or the circumstances surrounding the room. At 10 a.m., Renner entered B12 carrying a radio. Dr. Voss observed from the adjoining monitoring station with research assistant Daniel Mercer. At first, Renner appeared amused. He walked around the room. He examined the table. He sat in the chair. He looked at his reflection in the glass. "Feels like an interview room," he said. Dr. Voss asked whether he could see the observers. "No, just myself." "Do you see anything unusual?" "My hair looks terrible." For 11 minutes, nothing happened. Then Renner stopped smiling. His eyes remained fixed on the glass. Dr. Voss asked what he could see. Renner did not answer. She repeated the question. Renner leaned closer to the reflection. "There's someone standing behind me." The observers could see the entire room. No one was behind him. Dr. Voss instructed Renner not to turn around. He asked why. She told him the room was empty. Renner laughed once. It was a weak, nervous sound. "No, it isn't." He turned. The room was empty. When Renner looked back at the glass, he screamed. He moved away so quickly that the chair fell over. Dr. Voss ordered him to leave. The door did not open. Security attempted to release it from the corridor. The control panel showed that the lock was already disengaged. Renner pulled at the door. It did not move. He began shouting that something was coming through the glass. From the observation station, Dr. Voss and Mercer saw only Renner's reflection. But Renner reacted as though another person were approaching him. He backed into the corner. He covered his face. He begged the unseen figure to stop. Then his radio transmitted a second voice. It sounded exactly like Renner. The voice said, "Do not let me out." The real Renner froze. The duplicate voice continued, "If the door opens, it won't be me." Dr. Voss terminated the trial. At 10:19 a.m., the door opened on its own. Renner ran into the corridor and collapsed. He was examined by the medical unit and placed under observation. He remembered entering B12. He remembered seeing someone in the glass. He could not describe the figure. When asked what had frightened him, Renner repeated one sentence. It was practicing my face. Security footage from the trial was reviewed later that day. The video appeared normal until the final 22 seconds. During that period, Renner could be seen crouching in the corner. His reflection remained standing. The reflection looked directly at the camera. Then it smiled. Michael Renner disappeared from the medical ward that night. His bed restraints remained fastened. The door had not opened. No alarm had sounded. At 3:11 a.m., a cleaner found Renner's security badge on the table inside B12. The room was locked. Internal memorandum from Dr. Eleanor Voss to Director Halden. Subject: immediate suspension of Room B12 activity. The chamber presents an unacceptable threat to personnel. Subject: Renner's disappearance cannot be separated from the events observed during Trial 001. I recommend that B12 be sealed permanently and that all visual records be restricted. I further recommend that no individual view the observation glass alone. The reflection is not passive. It appears to react to attention. It may require an observer before it can manifest. The room may not be an observation chamber. It may be a mechanism that uses observation as an entry point. Director James Halden rejected the recommendation. His response consisted of 3 sentences. Continue testing. Determine whether the chamber can retrieve information. You have 72 hours. Dr. Voss should have refused. Years later, in her final recording, she admitted that she had been afraid. But fear was not the only reason she continued. She was curious. Renner had seen something impossible. The camera had recorded a reflection behaving independently of its source. If the phenomenon could reproduce a person's appearance, perhaps it could reproduce memories. Perhaps it could access information. Perhaps the room was not looking at bodies. Perhaps it was looking through them. She authorized a second trial. This time, the subject would not be human. Object Test 004. A sealed metal case was placed on the table inside B12. The case contained one of 5 photographs selected at random by a computer. No member of the observation team knew which image had been chosen. The room was monitored for 30 minutes. Nothing happened. Dr. Voss then entered the observation station and looked through the glass. Within 12 seconds, condensation appeared on the inside of the pane. A shape began to form, not words, a picture. The condensation gradually produced the outline of a lighthouse surrounded by dark water. When the case was opened, the photograph inside showed a lighthouse. The test was repeated. The second case contained a picture of a dog. The glass produced the outline of a dog. The third contained an empty road. The glass produced a road. During the fourth test, The computer selected a photograph that had not yet been printed. A blank sheet of photographic paper was placed inside the case. The file chosen for printing showed Dr. Voss standing beside her father during a childhood holiday. Before the printer activated, the observation glass began to change. The reflected room disappeared. In its place, Dr. Voss saw a beach. A young girl stood near the water. Her father held her hand. The image lasted 9 seconds. Dr. Voss terminated the experiment. She had never uploaded that photograph to Facility Omega's system. The original existed only in a locked drawer at her home. The room had not read the computer. It had read her. After that, the experiments became more controlled and more dangerous. Researchers entered B12 carrying sealed envelopes. Observers attempted to identify the contents through the glass. The room revealed private memories, hidden fears, images of places the observers had never described. Sometimes it showed events from their past. Sometimes it showed events that had not yet happened. A technician saw himself falling down an elevator shaft. 2 days later, he refused to use the elevators. He died when a ceiling panel collapsed above a stairwell. A medical officer saw an empty operating theater covered in ash. 1 week later, a fire destroyed the medical unit. A security guard saw his own funeral. He disappeared before the predicted date. No body was found. The room's predictions were not always direct, but they were always accurate. Soon, Facility Omega's senior command stopped asking whether B12 was dangerous. They began asking how it could be used. Audio log, Daniel Mercer. Date, November 2nd, 1998. Time, 23:17. Dr. Voss believes the room responds to expectation. I don't think that's correct. Expectation suggests we influence what appears. We don't. It chooses what to show us. Today I stood outside the glass for 17 minutes. At first, I saw the room. Then I saw myself inside it, not my reflection. I was sitting at the table with my head lowered. There was blood on my shirt. Someone was standing behind my chair. I couldn't see their face. I asked Dr. Voss to end the session. She told me she couldn't see any of it. That means the glass presents different images to different observers. Or it only presents images to the person it has selected. I asked security to check the room. They found a message scratched beneath the table. It said, "Daniel, you should have looked away. I have never entered B12. Daniel Mercer requested reassignment. His request was denied. The following morning, he arrived at the observation station and found a notebook on the console. The cover bore his name. Every page was filled with his handwriting. The entries described the previous 11 days in perfect detail. The final entry was dated 3 days in the future. It read, "Dr. Voss will ask me to enter the room. I will refuse. She will say, there is no other way. At 4:20 p.m., I will open the door. At 4:23 p.m., the observers will believe I am still inside. I will not be. Mercer showed the notebook to Dr. Voss. She immediately suspended all testing. Director Halden arrived in person 1 hour later. He ordered Mercer to enter B12. Mercer refused. Halden threatened him with detention. Dr. Voss intervened. She argued that the prediction itself might be designed to influence their behavior. If they followed the sequence, they could be creating the event the room had shown them. Halden asked what alternative she proposed. Dr. Voss said there was only one. No one would enter the room. No one would open the door. No one would observe the glass at 4:20 p.m. Halden reluctantly agreed. At 4 p.m., B12 was sealed. All personnel left the western wing. The corridor lights were switched off. The observation cameras continued recording automatically. At 4:20 p.m., the steel door opened. No one was near it. At 4:21 p.m., Daniel Mercer appeared inside the room. He was sitting at the table. His head was lowered. Blood covered his shirt. The camera recorded him clearly, but Mercer was not inside B12. He was in the command office with Dr. Voss, Halden, and 4 security officers. They watched the live feed together. Mercer began to panic. He demanded to know how the image was being produced. On the monitor, the other Mercer raised his head. He looked directly into the camera. Then he spoke. The room had no active microphone. His voice emerged from the command office speakers anyway. You left the door open. Every light in the western wing switched on. At 4:23 p.m., the Mercer standing in the command office disappeared. There was no flash, no sound. One moment, he was there. The next, the space between 2 security officers was empty. On the monitor, the figure inside B12 stood. It approached the observation glass. It placed one hand against the surface. Then the camera feed failed. When security reached the room, the door was closed. Daniel Mercer was gone. A message had appeared on the corridor side of the glass. One observer remains. After Mercer's disappearance, Dr. Voss was placed under investigation. Director Halden accused her of negligence. She accused him of treating the chamber as an intelligence asset. The disagreement ended when Facility Omega received instructions from an unidentified external authority. Testing would continue. Observation Room. B12 was to be assigned permanent staff. The phenomenon would be studied around the clock. No fewer than 2 observers were to be present at all times. No observer could remain on duty for more than 20 minutes. The glass was to be covered between sessions. The door was not to be opened without direct command authorization. A thick black curtain was installed over the observation window. For 3 days, no unusual activity occurred. On the fourth night, the curtain began moving. There was no airflow in the station. Two observers watched as the fabric slowly pulled inward, pressing against the glass. A human shape formed beneath it. A head, shoulders, two arms. The figure stood on the corridor side of the window. The observers were standing on that same side. The shape should have been between them and the glass. Yet there was nothing beneath the curtain. Then a handprint appeared in the fabric from behind it. One observer fled. The other, Officer Sarah Colling, remained frozen at the console. The curtain lifted by itself. B12 appeared empty. Colling stared through the glass. She began speaking to someone. The security recording captured only her side of the conversation. No. Pause. I don't believe you. Pause. That hasn't happened. Pause. My sister is alive. Pause. Stop showing me that. Colling stepped closer. She raised one hand to the glass. Her reflection did the same. Then the reflection turned its head toward something inside the room. Colling did not. Her reflection appeared frightened. It mouthed a single word. Run! Colling stepped back. The fluorescent light inside B12 went out. For 2 seconds, the room was completely dark. When the light returned, Colling's reflection was gone. The real Colling remained in front of the glass. She looked confused. She touched the surface. Then she screamed. Something on the other side had touched her hand. Colling survived. But from that night forward, she no longer appeared in reflective surfaces. Mirrors showed an empty room behind her. Security cameras recorded her normally unless she stood near glass. Then the image distorted. She was transferred to the medical wing. During her final interview, she insisted that her reflection had not disappeared. It was taken, she said. Taken where? Into the room. What is it doing there? Watching me. 3 days later, Observation Room B12 produced an image of Sarah Colling standing inside the chamber. She was smiling. At the time, the real Colling was sedated in a locked medical unit 2 levels above. When staff checked on her, her bed was empty. The window beside it had been covered from the inside with handwritten pages. Every page contained the same sentence. I can see through her now. Dr. Voss finally understood that the chamber was not predicting events. Not exactly. The images were instructions, suggestions, threats. The room showed a possible event, then manipulated its observers until that event occurred. But some incidents could not be explained by manipulation. Mercer had disappeared from a guarded room. Colling had vanished from a locked ward. Objects appeared inside B12 without passing through the door. The phenomenon was no longer limited to the glass. It had begun to reach beyond it. Dr. Voss reviewed every recording from the beginning. She watched Thomas Vale enter. She watched Renner's reflection move. She watched Mercer's duplicate speak. She watched Sarah Colling disappear from the glass. Frame by frame, she searched for a pattern. At 3:40 a.m., she found one. A figure appeared in every recording. It was visible only for a single frame. Sometimes it stood in the corner of B12. Sometimes behind an observer. Sometimes reflected in the monitor screen. The figure was tall and narrow. Its face could not be resolved, but its position changed from recording to recording. In the earliest footage, it stood deep inside the chamber. In later footage, it stood near the glass. In the recording of Colling's final session, it was no longer inside B12. It was standing in the observation station, behind Dr. Voss. She turned. The station was empty. Then she noticed a photograph lying on the console. It showed her sitting at the monitors. The picture had been taken from the dark corridor behind her. On the back, someone had written a time, 2:14 a.m. The current time was 2:09. Dr. Voss left the station immediately. She ordered the western wing evacuated. At 2:14, the first warning appeared on the observation glass. "You are standing too close." Night Supervisor Adrian Cole saw it on the live feed. He stepped back. Something struck the other side of the glass. The pane cracked. It was the first physical damage the room had ever sustained. Security entered B12. They found no one, but a photograph of Cole lay on the chair. It showed him standing in the corridor moments earlier. Behind him stood Dr. Voss. Dr. Voss had been 2 floors away. Behind Dr. Voss stood the tall figure, and behind the figure was another observation window. Through that window, countless people could be seen watching. Emergency meeting transcript. Director Halden. The room has breached containment. Dr. Voss. It was never contained. Halden. The glass is damaged. That gives us access. Voss. Access to what? Halden. The space behind it. Voss. There is no space behind it. Halden. Then what cracked the glass? Voss. Something that wanted you to ask that question. Halden. We can insert a camera through the fracture. Voss. You will do nothing. Halden. You no longer direct this investigation. Voss. Then listen to me as a witness. The chamber has spent weeks teaching us to look. Every experiment increased observation. Every incident brought more personnel. Every disappearance made us study it more closely. We thought we were collecting information. We were feeding it attention. Halden. Attention is not a physical resource. Voss. Not to us. Halden. Prepare the camera. At 6:30 a.m., a fiber optic camera was inserted through the crack. The lens should have encountered solid concrete less than 30 centimeters beyond the pane. Instead, the cable continued for 12 meters. The camera transmitted a narrow concrete corridor. Its walls were wet. The floor was covered in black dust. Identical observation windows lined both sides. Behind each window was a different room. The first contained an empty hospital ward. The second showed a railway carriage with all its seats facing backward. The third showed an office inside Facility Omega. The office belonged to Director Halden. In the image, Halden sat at his desk. His body was decomposed. The real Halden watched the feed without speaking. The camera moved farther down the corridor. One window showed Michael Renner standing in B12. Another showed Daniel Mercer seated at the table. Another showed Sarah Colling pressing her hands against the glass. They appeared alive. They did not react to the camera. At the end of the corridor was a final observation window. Behind it stood the research team. Dr. Voss, Director Halden, 3 technicians, 2 security officers. They were gathered around the monitor, watching the camera feed. The camera was looking at them from behind. Everyone in the observation station turned. The corridor behind them was empty. On the feed, however, the tall figure stood among them. Its head was bent forward. Its face hovered close to Dr. Voss's ear. The audio channel activated. A whisper emerged. "You finally found the other side." The fiber optic cable pulled tight. A technician tried to withdraw it. Something pulled from beyond the glass. The cable cut through his gloves and tore skin from his palms. Then it vanished into the fracture. The crack closed. No mark remained. Every monitor in Facility Omega activated simultaneously. The screens showed Observation Room B12. The chamber was no longer empty. Dozens of people stood inside. Renner, Mercer, Colling, Thomas Vale, missing technicians, deceased personnel, individuals no one recognized. All faced the observation glass. All stared outward. Then, in perfect synchronization, they raised one hand. The lights failed. Facility Omega entered emergency lockdown. When the power returned, 12 members of staff were missing. Director Halden was among them. The personnel remained visible on the monitors. They were standing inside B12. Yet, when security looked through the real observation glass, the room appeared empty. Dr. Voss ordered the camera system destroyed. The screens continued transmitting after their power cables were cut. She ordered the western wing sealed with concrete. Construction crews arrived that afternoon. They found no observation room B12. The corridor ended at a blank wall. All structural scans showed solid rock. For 48 hours, the room was gone. Then staff began finding photographs. A cook discovered an image of himself sleeping in his quarters. A medical officer found a photograph taken from beneath her desk. A security guard received 6 images showing him walking toward an unmarked door. The last photograph showed the door open. On the 3rd night, a black glass window appeared in the wall of the main archive. It looked into B12. The room had moved. Final audio log, Dr. Eleanor Voss. Date, November 11th, 1998. Time, 1:52. I am recording this without authorization. Director Halden is gone. Mercer is gone. Renner, Colling, Vale. All of them are still visible in the room. But they are not prisoners. I understand that now. They are observation points. The chamber copies the observer, then continues to use the copy after the original is removed. Every person taken by B12 becomes another pair of eyes. It does not look through the glass. It looks through them, through us. That is why the room moved. It no longer requires a fixed location. It can appear wherever one of its observers remembers it. We carried it out in our minds. I have instructed remaining personnel not to discuss the chamber, not to draw it, not to read the reports, not to view the footage. It may be impossible to obey. The act of warning someone creates another observer. If this recording survives, you must understand the contradiction. You need to know enough to avoid the room, but knowing about it may allow it to find you. At 12:40 tonight, I found a report on my desk. It was written in my handwriting. It described this recording word for word. The final paragraph states that I will enter B12 at 2:14 a.m. I will sit at the table. I will look through the glass. I will see the people listening to this file. The report says they will believe they are hearing a story. They will believe the events ended in 1998. They will not realize that listening is also a form of observation. I have burned the report. I have locked myself inside the archive. I will not enter the room. I will not follow the prediction. A long pause followed. Then the recording captured 3 knocks. Dr. Voss stopped breathing. Another 3 knocks sounded, not from the archive door, from the wall behind her. She whispered, "There is no window in this room." A low electrical hum began, the same frequency recorded inside B12. Dr. Voss moved away from the microphone. A mechanical click followed. Then the sound of a curtain being drawn. She spoke again, but her voice was farther away. "No." Another voice answered. It sounded exactly like Dr. Voss. "You already looked." The recording filled with static. For 7 seconds, 2 versions of Dr. Voss could be heard breathing. One close to the microphone, one somewhere beyond the wall. Then the distant voice said, "Come and see what we found." Dr. Voss screamed. A chair scraped across the floor. The microphone struck the ground. Through the distortion, an alarm began sounding. At 2:14 a.m., the recording ended. Dr. Eleanor Voss was never found. Her archive room remained locked from the inside. There were no windows, no hidden exits, no damage to the walls. Investigators found only the audio recorder and a metal chair facing a section of bare concrete. On the wall, at eye level, someone had drawn the outline of a large observation window. Beneath it were 5 words. "Now you are watching too." Incident Report, November 14th, 1998. Following the disappearance of Dr. Voss, Facility Omega was evacuated. All records connected to Room B12 were collected for destruction. Personnel involved in the operation were instructed not to view the documents. The physical archive consisted of 24 audio tapes, 9 reels of security footage, 73 photographs, and 1 handwritten notebook. During transportation, the convoy stopped responding. The vehicles were found 6 hours later on an empty road. Their engines were running, all doors were open. No personnel were present. The archive containers were empty. 1 videotape remained on the driver's seat of the lead vehicle. The label read, "File 002, the observation room." The tape contained 43 minutes of footage. Most of it showed an empty room. 1 chair, 1 table, 1 fluorescent light, 1 pane of observation glass. At the 42-minute mark, a woman entered. She was identified as Dr. Eleanor Voss. She sat in the chair and faced the glass. For several seconds, she remained motionless. Then she looked directly toward the camera. "Do not destroy the recording," she said. "It is the only thing keeping the room on this side." She stood and approached the observation window. Behind the glass, hundreds of faces became visible. Some belonged to missing Facility Omega personnel. Others could not be identified. They appeared to be standing in different rooms, homes, offices, and corridors. Each person faced an unseen screen. Each person was watching the same recording. Dr. Voss placed her hand against the glass. "When the recording stops," she continued, "it chooses a new room." The tape ended. 3 hours later, an observation window appeared in the convoy investigation office. 2 officers disappeared. The incident was classified. Facility Omega was officially decommissioned in December 1998. Its surface entrance was demolished. The underground levels were filled with concrete. No attempt was made to recover the remaining archives. For nearly 20 years, there were no further confirmed reports. Then, in 2017, workers renovating a government storage facility discovered an unmarked room behind a temporary wall. Inside was a table. a chair, a fluorescent ceiling light, and a wide pane of black observation glass. On the table lay a modern digital camera. Its memory card contained photographs of the workers entering the building that morning. The final image had been taken from inside one of their homes. The room was sealed. The facility was evacuated. By the following morning, the chamber had disappeared. Reports continued. A hospital security officer described a black window appearing in an unused basement. A railway worker found an observation room at the end of a service tunnel that should not have existed. A university researcher discovered footage of herself standing behind an observation window 3 days before she vanished. In every case, witnesses described the same objects: one table, one chair, one ceiling light, and glass that reflected the room incorrectly. Authorities attempted to identify a pattern. The chamber appeared most often in buildings containing surveillance systems, police stations, hospitals, laboratories, transport hubs, data centers, places designed for watching. It also appeared after archived footage had been viewed, copied, shared, restored. Each new observer seemed to give the phenomenon another location from which to operate. In 2025, an anonymous digital file was uploaded to a private server used for preserving classified recordings. The file contained the original B12 footage. Metadata indicated that it had been created only 7 minutes before it was discovered. The video showed the observation room. The chair was empty. The glass reflected a dark room that did not match the chamber. A computer monitor could be seen in the reflection. Someone was sitting in front of it. The image was too blurred to identify the person, but the monitor displayed the B12 footage. The observer was watching the room. At 38 minutes, the fluorescent light began to flicker. At 39 minutes, a shadow appeared behind the observer in the reflection. At 40 minutes, the observer leaned closer to the screen. At 41 minutes, the shadow moved closer. At 42 minutes, Dr. Voss appeared inside B12. She stood behind the chair. She looked exhausted, older than she had been in 1998. She raised one finger to her lips. Then she pointed through the glass at the person watching, at the person behind them. The file ended before either figure moved. Investigators traced the server access. The recording had been opened on 16 separate devices. 13 were located and destroyed. 2 belonged to individuals who had disappeared. The final device could not be identified. It remained connected for 1 hour and 1 minute. During that time, the unknown viewer watched the entire recording without interruption. At the end of the file, a new frame appeared. It showed a room no investigator recognized. There was a desk, a screen, a person listening in the darkness. Behind that person was a wide pane of black glass. The glass had not been there at the beginning of the recording. The person did not seem to notice. Not immediately. Then the fluorescent hum began. The observers stopped moving. A hand appeared on the glass behind them. 5 words formed slowly on the surface. "You are standing too close." The person turned. The feed was lost. The final device has never been located. Archive closure notice. No further research into Observation Room B12 is authorized. Do not search for Facility Omega. Do not attempt to reconstruct the chamber from surviving descriptions. Do not watch reflective surfaces while reviewing this file. Do not replay the final section. If you notice an unfamiliar window in the room around you, do not approach it. Do not cover it. Do not photograph it. Most importantly, do not look through it. The chamber does not show you what is on the other side. It shows the other side where you are. And once it has seen you, it does not need the room anymore. The recovered tape should have ended there. For 27 years, investigators believed it did. But during the most recent restoration, technicians discovered an additional audio track beneath the original recording. The track had been too quiet to detect with older equipment. It contained no music, no alarms, no mechanical noise, only breathing. The breathing continued throughout the entire file, sometimes fast, sometimes slow, always close to the microphone. At first, analysts assumed it belonged to Dr. Voss. Then they compared the waveform to her final recording. It did not match. The breathing belonged to several people: Renner, Mercer, Colling, Vale, and dozens of unidentified voices. Near the end, another sound could be heard: a chair shifting, a person leaning forward. Then a whisper. The voice was newly recorded. It had not been present in any previous copy. The whisper said, "We can see the next observer." A pause followed. Then all the voices spoke together. "They are still listening." The restoration technicians stopped the recording. The lights in the laboratory went out. Emergency power activated. On the wall opposite the monitor was a wide pane of black glass. No such window had existed before. The technicians saw their reflections, 3 people standing in the dark. But the reflections were not looking back at them. They were staring past them, toward something behind the technicians. One of them turned. Only one technician left the laboratory. He could not remember what he had seen. He could not explain where the others had gone. He carried a photograph in his hand. It showed the laboratory after the power failure. The observation window was visible on the wall. Behind the glass stood Dr. Voss, Renner, Mercer, Colling, Vale, the missing technicians, and hundreds of others. They were not looking at the camera. They were looking through it, at the person holding the photograph, at everyone who would later see it, at everyone who would hear the file. The surviving technician destroyed the photograph, or believed he did. 3 days later, a copy appeared on his bedroom wall. The next night, another appeared inside his locked car. The third was found beneath his pillow. Each image was slightly different. In the first, the figures behind the glass were distant. In the second, they were closer. In the third, Dr. Voss stood directly against the pane. Her mouth was open. A sentence had been written beneath the image. "The room is ready." The technician disappeared before sunrise. His home was locked from the inside. Police found no sign of forced entry. The bedroom contained no unusual structure, no hidden passage, no observation window. Only a metal chair placed in the center of the room. It faced the blank wall. On the chair was a digital audio recorder. The device contained one file. The recording lasted 14 seconds. For the first 10, there was silence. Then the technician whispered, "I thought the wall was empty." A fluorescent light clicked on. Someone knocked 3 times on glass. The technician began to scream. Before the file ended, a second voice spoke. It sounded like him, but calmer, closer, already on the other side. It said, "Now it is. File 002, the observation room. Archive status active. Observer status confirmed. Do not turn around."